Sony don't give a crap about none of yo bull crap. It's official. It's official. They've actually come out. They actually said it that exact way in their meeting with investors. You see, what they did is they had a sort of earnings presentation, and they did an investor Q&A, which is something they do regularly, where Sony executives go up and then take questions from investors. Most of these investors are like the big institutional guys. They're not mom and pop investors. You know, these are like the guys that run the fund that owns $300 million in Sony stock, right? So it's like the big movers and shakers. They want to keep them happy. And during this Q&A, they were asked several questions about their current strategies and all of that. For Sony's a big company. People don't realize, like, one of Sony's biggest cash cows in terms of business is actually like life insurance in Japan. Who knew? Who knew? But they have they got a lot of pots on the stove, but they have a very diversified business. Even still, the vast majority of revenue comes from their gaming division. It's like their true bread and butter. And so naturally, investors will ask them a lot of questions about that side of their business, which is always interesting. And what is this article in particular? Well, IGN wrote about it. Sony says discontinuation of PlayStation 6 won't have any negative impact on its business now or in the future. And actually, specifically, their CFO said directly, basically, like, try harder, losers. Like, that's effectively what they said. What is this specifically? Well, of course, we all know that Sony announced that they're going to be discontinuing physical hardware or physical media starting January of 2028. They're giving a runway. It seems to time out pretty much exactly with when the PlayStation 6 will be coming. So it looks like that's not going to have a disk drive. They're not going to do any physical stuff. They might support like external CD drives for games that released prior to that deadline, but that's why I kind of suspect that it's going to be for the PlayStation 6, because then they don't have to do that. Like, any PlayStation 6 game is going to be digital only, and I think that's how they're handling it. But if you have not seen the blowback, you must not be on Twitter, which is probably good for you. But it's been very, very clear that gamers are not thrilled about this. The uproar has been loud. Let's just say they've been regularly ratioed in almost every post they've made on social media, both on like Twitter, but then also places like Instagram. They are often being ratioed, just, you know, getting flooded with comments of people calling them out. However, Sony doesn't think it makes much of a difference. Speaking during an investor-focused Q&A during this first fiscal quarter financial results, Sony CFO Lin Tao answered multiple questions about the company's decision to kill discs, which has sparked a backlash online. Tao was asked if Sony saw any impact now or in the future, which will see PlayStation disc production come to an end in 2028. And she said, quote, "We are not seeing any impact on our business as of now. Going forward, about the content, sales, large part is already digitized. Therefore, as a result of the discontinuation of a disc, we don't see that there will be any negative impact on our business. However, as I already said, the users, the players have attachments, and we have to think about how we respond to those feedbacks." I mean, we're not going to do anything, but we have to think about it. You know, we're not going to like respond or like change our mind. We're just going to like think about what they are saying and then do other things that don't make them happy, but that move on, you know? That's how we do it. Earlier in the Q&A, Tao said that Sony, quote, wouldn't change its mind while acknowledging, this is the most corpo thing ever, strong views from the video game community. In other words, their customers, you know, like, that's what's really shocking, is that they're like, yeah, there's some strong opinions coming from some. It's like, bro, that's your audience. But here's the first little thing. We are not seeing any impact on our business as of now. Frankly, what would that impact even be? Like, they've not done it yet, so what would the expected influence on their bottom line be? People are still going to buy games that they already were buying. They still are going to play the games on their PlayStations that they already have. So their behaviors aren't really changing. The only thing that maybe could change or have an impact would be if those like quote unquote blackout weeks or days would actually have an impact. But I don't think those are going to be very widespread. Personally, I would love to be wrong, but I've been around the block enough to know that when people say we're going to not play PlayStation for a week to show them we're not happy. Most people will make it 12 hours and then they're going to boot up that night and be like, well, it's just me. And then everybody says that. And then pretty soon the whole thing falls apart. I would love for people to string together and make their voices heard. I'd be surprised if it does anything. And even if it has some sort of quantifiable impact on like revenue, which is all they care about, it's going to go back to normal when people go back to their PlayStations at the end of the blackout. So, you know, I don't think that'll do much. What would actually have an impact is if they launch the PlayStation 6 and people just don't buy it. I mean, that would be an oopsie. if they launch that and then people are saying they're not going to buy it specifically because, not because it's necessarily expensive, which it will be, but people are saying that they're not buying it because of the lack of physical media, the lack of consumer, protections, stuff like that. Then you might actually see an adjustment in behavior, but that's all speculative right now. And we are talking about like a year and a half from now in early 2028. So it's really hard to say, frankly, what the impact will be. My thought has always been that I think Sony is going to, well, they announced it at this point because they're expecting and hoping that people will just kind of have forgotten about it and move on by the time this happens. Like, we'll see the PlayStation 6 revealed and it's like, oh yeah, no physical media. Yeah, they announced that like a year ago, I think. Anyway, like, I think that that's what they're relying on, is just that people will move on, get bored, as it were. They continued, the online backlash continued to call, as gamers continued to call on Sony to U-turn its decision, signing online petitions and swarming over PlayStation social media posts to express concern about video game preservation and ownership, even overshadowing the release of new games that have nothing to do with what's going on at Sony. Meanwhile, backers of physical media have called on gamers to boycott PlayStation for a week in August to send a message to Sony that its decision to kill discs from 2028 is unacceptable. Complaints have also come from other groups. The UK's Digital Entertainment and Retail Association, or ERA, for example, called Sony's decision a quote-unquote triumph of corporate convenience over consumer choice. When Sony announced its decision, it said it was simply following consumer trends. Quote, in response to shifting trends in consumer preference, new games will be released on PlayStation Store and at retailers in digital formats only, said Sid Schumann, Senior Director of SIE Content Communications. Yeah, I think, they don't care about Twitter. They are going to do what they're going to do. And I think the only way you see any sort of behavioral change, again, is if, for one, gamers actually act on their disdain and frustration. And then also if we see like Xbox doing the opposite. Like I think personally, Project Helix probably does not have physical media either. I think that's been the plan since like 2022. There were always little hints and insinuations from like Sarah Bond and Phil Spencer where they were like suggesting that, well, the future is digital and the future, they would say stuff like that. I would not be surprised if Helix is not being designed with physical media in mind. That being said, I think they could go and try to go the opposite direction of this. And, for example, have like an official external disk drive or external SD card slot or whatever it ends up being. And they support physical media, even if, the console, the main body of the console itself is digital. And I think that would go a long way with a lot of people just to have that option, especially when it comes to like backwards compatibility and stuff. I think that would excite people. One of the reasons why Sony is not expected to reverse this decision, though, is because they have a massive plant. I believe it's the largest plant that manufactures Blu-rays like in the world. If not, it's one of them. And it's in Austria, I believe. And they have already started like scaling down that factory and that plant, and they are redoing it and replacing entire like arms of that factory with new machines and new equipment to make like micro lenses and stuff. Which, does anyone know what like micro lenses are used for? Can anybody take a wild, crazy guess? Why might Sony want to pivot away from discs and instead make micro lenses? It's because those micro lenses are used in lasers, yes, and in fiber optic data transmission, which you need for data centers. Yay! It's those little lenses that are used to like direct and use fiber optic cabling across massive data centers that need ridiculous bandwidth. Spy cameras is a fun answer too. It's just like tiny cameras. No, they're like little bitty lenses and stuff made for making fiber optic cables and things that allow for the internet to work. And so they're pivoting that way. Yeah, it's for filthy clankers indeed. So with all this, I don't think Sony's going to pivot away. I think they are fully committed. And frankly, her entire attitude, if you don't know Lin Tao, she is just like, she could be a character in Cyberpunk. I mean, she is just like the ultimate corpo, bite me kind of person. Like, does not give a crap, okay? They're gonna do what they're gonna do, whether you like it or not. They do not care. It is as corporate as you can imagine. So I don't think they're gonna change. I think this is how it's gonna be. Just like, you remember what happened with frickin' Xbox circa 2013, 14, they were making a bunch of decisions that were insanely stupid. They said like, no, we're going to force you to buy a Kinect, whether you want to or not. You got to buy a Kinect in your Xbox One. It's also always online, and we're not going to allow you to share games. So if you bought a physical game, you cannot share it to somebody else. It's tied to your console. They did all this stuff. Everyone's like, what is wrong with you? And what happened? It went really bad for about a year. And then they started manually flipping on every decision that the previous management made, undoing all of that. That is unfortunately like the best case scenario for all of this, is that these decisions start to go bad in 2028 and Sony just screws up and consumers are pissed off and they're not buying the PlayStation 6. People are canceling their memberships because remember, they track all of this data. If they start to see that people who had PlayStation 5s and PlayStation accounts there, if they see that those people are all of a sudden, right at like 2028, they're not upgrading to the PlayStation 6 and their playtime plummeted on PlayStation. They then see that those people moved over to PC. Ooh. Oh, that's not great. You know, that's when you could actually see, okay, maybe we need to change course. At that point, it'll be too late to add physical media back in because again, those plants that make these things, you can't just casually Control Z that. Like, it's a literal factory. And if you change the factory to do something else, you can't just undo that. So at that point, physical media will just be what it's going to be. And unless there's a major player like Xbox that's willing to go out on a limb and try to keep it alive, it's going to be what it's going to be, unfortunately. Which is why, you know, if this is the new reality, which it appears to be, that's why the best case scenario for everybody is that there are then consumer protections, opening up of the platforms, stuff like that to protect consumer interests. Things like requiring Sony to have a same like return period policy like Steam does. That's something regulators could demand, that you did that. You know, the same thing with like stop killing games. If you bought a license to a game, quote unquote license to a game, and then they decide to revoke it, you should get a refund. You bought it, you bought the thing, you should get a refund. You know, if you're going to take away the access of the physical media, we should still have some protections for the product that we bought. So the hope is that this, you know, is a domino, and it's not a domino we wanted to knock over, but if it's going to knock over, hopefully it knocks over 10 others that end up with broader consumer protections on the digital side of things. That's at least the hope. That's at least the hope. But yeah, if there's one takeaway from all this, it's that Lin Tao doesn't give a crap what you think and is going to do what she's going to do. Okay, they do not care. They do not care. They are fully committed to this digital future, and they do not want to pivot away from it if they can help it. So that's what it's going to be. That's what it's going to be. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. I can bet whatever you want that Sarah is trying so hard right now to try and add a disc to Helix. Oh, Asha is. I think
At Own Night donated £20 through
probably.
Super Chat. Did you catch the Apple earnings report last night? Their Neo and Mini sales went through the roof. ARM is making us rethink how we use memory. Give it a year before Apple bridges the gap with Proton or approaches crossover.
Thank you for the 20. First of all, like super generous. But I think you're right. I did a segment we did a clip. Oh yeah. It was on the Clips channel. I just did this like 3 weeks ago. Trevor clipped it. Apple might be quietly prepping for a gaming push. I encourage you to watch this if you haven't already, because I kind of ran through my thesis and everything that I think they're doing. There's a few videos that have been done on it. This particular one from Snazzy Labs breaks down some of the progress they have quietly been making on that frontier. And it's pretty insane. Like, casually updating something on the back end that totally overhauls the pipeline for how it calculates everything for these games. And it's seeing massive performance uplifts, like from 12 FPS to like 45 with nothing changed on like a base MacBook Pro. So just like imagine if Apple decided to actually commit and try, bro, game over, game over. Could totally change stuff. Could totally change the industry. Just imagine if Apple came in and started swinging their big fruit around, dude. That talk about pressure on Sony. Imagine the meltdown in those corporate offices. Like if Apple were to actually try, because they are the masters of hardware supply chains and economies of scale. I'm just saying, they're big nuts. I was trying to think of some long fruit, a banana. They're swinging their banana around, but it's Apple. It didn't really click. Anyway, I do think that the new CEO, John Turnus, he has expressed interest in new markets, and that's one of them.
$21 through Super Chat. Hey Luke, hope your feet don't smell.
You know, sometimes feet be feeding. Know what I'm saying? Know what I'm saying? Thank you for the 21. Appreciate you. John Apple, yes, the new CEO, John Apple, he has expressed an interest in new emerging markets and markets that are previously untapped. And that is one of them. Like gaming has been an area that Apple has never really gone close to, but Apple is able to scale in a way that like Xbox can't with their hardware, because Apple can go and basically rent out half of TSMC and just be like, yeah, we need that capacity for all of our chips. By the way, we're going to use these same chips like the M5. We're going to use that in our next gen gaming device, which is going to have like performance in line with like a PS5 or a PlayStation 6 or whatever it is. And we're just going to put it through like Proton layers, just like Steam has done on Steam Machine and Steam Deck. There's no reason they couldn't do that. And at Apple's scale, it probably ends up being way more cost efficient and cost effective than anything else on the market. Like that could actually change things. That could really change things. I know people hear Apple and gaming and they roll their eyes, but like, dude, if anybody could actually go and like put pressure on Sony, it would be like the almost $5 trillion company that is Apple. Like Sony, just put it in terms of scale. Sony market cap is 138 billion. Okay. If you take every share of Sony and you multiply it by the market price, the estimated value of the entire company is 138 billion. Apple's market cap is 4.43 trillion. Okay. Now, they're having a rough day. My God. Why is Apple down 9.6%? Did John Apple find a worm? Oh yeah. It was Tim Cook. Tim Cook said that they have very significant component shortages. And if even Apple is having component shortages for hardware, that's not good. There's also rumors they're going to raise the price of iPhones like by hundreds of dollars, not just like $50, but like hundreds of dollars, which would be a mess. But anyway, John Apple off to a great start. He takes over September 1st. So, you know, he's in the home stretch. Tim Apple is almost done, and then it's John Apple's turn. Sure is. Let's see. Okay, yeah, anyway, long story short, Sony makes us sad. In my opinion, I don't think PlayStation will open their platform. They do need a robust change to their store for people to stay. PlayStation 6 might be their last console, in my opinion, and they just become full software publisher. No, I think Sony is very well aware. I think they are very well aware that the only way that you really build out a platform is by having a hardware base to it, which is why they're pivoting away from PC. So, because I think also, just frankly, a lot of players were leaving PlayStation in order to go to PC. Like, why would you stay on PC if you can go, or why'd you stay on PlayStation if you could just move over to PC? Like, why? Why would you do that? Especially if we're talking that the PlayStation 6 is going to be $1,200. Why would you do that? Why would you do that when you could just go to PC for about the same price, if not more? Like PlayStation's latest video has the comments turned off. Most of them do recently, and I don't blame them. Like they're just going to get blown out. in the best way possible, you know, frankly, because PC is still more expensive. If you're buying raw new components, yeah. But if you're going used components, or if you're going with like all-in-ones and pre-builts that can benefit from economies of scale, you can actually get pretty good deals on a lot of stuff. And even if you do end up spending more, you know, if it's going to be $1,200 for a PlayStation 6, and then you're like, ooh, or I could buy a PC for $2,000. That $2,000, that might be well worth it, especially when you consider like the regular deep sales that are available on PC, because it's an open marketplace, as opposed to PlayStation, which is totally locked down. Free multiplayer, you're not spending money every single month on multiplayer, things like that, you know, and you get a PC out of it, which is also a nice thing. He took my thing.